Hey, it's Ryan with this week's Mille Lacs Fishing Report. It is early August and we've been having another great season out on the big lake. First things first, I'm going to go over some of the current conditions out here. You know, right now water temps are about 72, 73 degrees. Water levels are pretty good for this time of year. I would say that we are about average. We definitely started low this spring, but things have come back up and that rain was much needed. Lastly is the bug hatches out here. We've had a lot of midges this year, seen some caddises, seen some mayfly hatches, but nothing of any real significance, just pretty average overall. What I would like to add to this is we are kind of over the hump as far as summer goes. I would say that in years past I've talked about this, but I'm going to make a note of it again. Whenever you get to mid to late July, there's an event that happens out here. It's usually when you get a cold front in mid to late July, you see a big push of the young of the year bait fish, the little fry that are now about an inch long. Everything that hatched this spring starts moving out from the shallows and out into the deeper water. A lot of years this is really significant and really easy to see, but there's so much bait in Mille Lacs this year that it's a little bit harder for me to judge just how much bait has moved out in the lake because there is so much bait out in the lake. Now, what I will say is every year about this time, there's some big changes as far as what the fish are keyed in on, primarily the bass and the walleyes. Usually in June and earlier in the spring, a lot of these fish are targeting larger bait fish because they're last year's young of the year. They've gotten bigger, you know, they're probably 3 to 4 inch bait fish at that point. But once you have this change, usually taking place mid to late July, a lot of the fish out here will start keying in on the smaller bait fish, those little inch and a half tiny minnows that have moved out from the shallow water out deep. And that can have a significant impact on your lure choice and just the fishing overall. So getting started with the muskies, there are two different patterns that I target primarily this time of year. One is going to be shallow and one is going to be deep. The shallow bite can be broken down two ways, the way we target it in my boat. One is going to be the deeper weeds and the other one will be rock piles. For the deeper weeds, generally what we're doing is we're hanging around closer to the mouths of the bays. The deeper weeds we can find 10 to 12 feet of water, that good green cabbage, that's generally where we find our best fishing. There's a few different techniques that work well for us. Number one is going to be bucktails. You know, bucktails are just the standard out here throughout the summertime months. Generally what I tell people to do is go with a darker bucktail on a darker day and a brighter bucktail on a brighter day. You can either burn them in, which has worked well in the past, or you can just do a moderate pace. It's up to you. The last couple of years, I would say we've been doing well just casting them out and reeling them back at a moderate pace. Next would be topwaters. Topwaters are always a great bait out here throughout the summer months. The plopper styles are probably my favorite. What we generally do is we wait for overcast days like I have behind me, or we fish them during sunrise or sunset. Lastly is glide baits. Glide baits are probably my favorite way to fish muskies. There's just something about a glide bait that will elicit a response even out of a fish that's just disinterested in everything else. Glide baits just get the attention of muskies. Whether they bite them or not, they like to come see what's going on. They like to follow them. And one cool thing about that is when you get a fish to move on a glide bait, you can come back at a different time, whether it's a moon phase or maybe it's sunrise or sunset, and you can either throw that same bait on them or you can throw a different bait at them. Next is the rocks. There's two different ways we generally fish the rocks. We're either going to be throwing crankbaits and making a little bottom contact, or else we'll be throwing the bucktails. You can throw topwaters as well, but one of those two techniques are generally my go-tos. When fishing the rocks, most of the fish that we've seen around the rocks over the last couple of weeks have been somewhere near the top of the rock pile. It doesn't mean they're in the shallowest water, but they're somewhere in the vicinity of the top of the reef. So keep that in mind when you're looking around for them. Fish the tops of the reefs, but don't be afraid to get a little bit off the edge and work that water as well. Generally, the tops of the reefs that we're fishing could be anywhere from about 3 to 9 feet of water. For the deep bite, the most popular way of fishing muskies out deep on Mille Lacs is to troll them. The guys that do a lot of trolling out here, they generally troll fast. They're going about 4 miles an hour and they use very large crankbaits. A lot of times they're going down anywhere from about a third to halfway down the water column with them, but you can also put a bait up real high just under the surface. A lot of times those muskies will be riding way up in the water column and they're eager to hit something that's close to the surface. When trolling for muskies, a lot of guys will fish the edges of the gravel bars. They'll fish around the mud flats, you know, the tips and edges of the mud flats. But another thing you want to keep in mind is bait fish. Wherever you can find a lot of bait, there's sure to be some muskies around that area. Next is the walleyes. You know, there's a couple different ways to fish walleyes out here. Actually, there's a lot of different ways to fish walleyes out here. Midsummer popular techniques can be Lindy rigs, they can be spinners, lead core, bobbers and leeches. Guys will fish jigging wraps. There's numerous ways to catch them out here. But there's a lot of bait in the lake this year, and a lot of people have been struggling compared to years past to get their keeper size fish. Now there's a lot of walleyes in Mille Lacs. We're finding them very shallow, from as shallow as about 8 feet of water, all the way out to the depths, out in 36 feet of water. And it seems like, to me, the shallower fish tend to be the keeper size fish, and they tend to be a lot easier to catch. Now, while you go out to the flats and you see a lot of walleyes, you're going to see a ton of bait fish out there. Those walleyes are very well fed. So what I would recommend doing is, if you have the equipment to do it, if you have the live sonar, a bobber and a leech in about 8 to 12 feet of water. Some days we go all the way out to 22 feet of water, but generally 8 to 12 feet of water, a bobber and a leech. What we do is we search around with the live sonar until we find schools or little pods of walleyes, 4 to 6 fish at a time. We throw the bobber and leech right on top of them. Generally, we're fishing about 3 feet off the bottom. These fish, you have to sort through them because there's a lot of them that won't bite, but if you keep at it, there's a lot of them that will bite, and a guy who sticks to it will generally be able to get his limit throughout the day. We've been doing very well with this technique, not just this year, but the last couple of years, and it's worked for us all the way throughout the season, all the way until things start to really cool down in the fall. With the bobber and leech, what we're doing is we're using a little bit larger bobbers. We're using a 1/2 ounce lead sinker, and a couple feet below it on a leader, we're using a 32nd ounce jig and just a large leech. All we do is when we find the fish, we cast right up to them and we sort through them. There's some that bite and there's some that won't. But throughout the day, you'll generally get your keepers, and a lot of days we've been doing very, very well with this, even considering that it's been a tougher bite this year. Now, if the bobber and leech thing isn't your speed, another technique that works really well out here is lead core. And the thing with lead core, and the reason why it works so well on Mille Lacs this time of year, is because those young of the year bait fish are moving from the shallows and they're moving out deep. So you have a transition from when the walleyes were eating bigger baits earlier in the season to now the walleyes kind of shift their focus and they key in on the smaller baits. Little number 4 Selmo hornets, small number 5 shad wraps and flicker shads are all 3 great baits to catch walleyes this time of year. Generally what you do is you troll on the deeper edges of the gravel bars, or you go along the edges of the mud flats, or you can simply go out to the basin. But the big key with lead core is maintaining a depth. So what I generally recommend people to do is kind of pick a depth. You know, find the edge of the flat and stick to it, or go out to the basin and just stick to the basin, or fish the transition on the gravel bar and try to stick to a depth and maintain a speed. That'll keep your bait right in the strike zone. Usually what we do is we run our baits anywhere from about 2 to 4 feet off of the bottom at about 2 to 2.2 miles an hour. Lastly, if neither of those techniques are your favorite, you can simply go out to a rock reef out here and bobber fish. The tops of the gravel bars have been producing some fish, as well as some of the deeper rock piles in the evening hours. So a bobber and a leech on tops of the gravel bars or on the deeper edges of the rock piles are a great way to get a couple walleyes in the evenings. Lastly is the smallmouth. We've been doing well on the smallmouth. You know, there are times where it's a little bit more of a grind midday, but those windows, those bite windows that we've been having out here, they kind of change day to day. Sometimes you get them right in the middle of the day, sometimes it's more towards evening. It just depends. You got to kind of stick to it. There's 3 different baits that have been working best for us. One is going to be the swim bait, the second is going to be the Ned rig, and third is going to be a spy bait. Any one of those 3 can work well. What I would say is the Ned rig is always a consistent producer out here. The spy bait tends to work best for us on calmer days, and the swim bait tends to work best for us on windier days and out deeper. We're finding fish anywhere from, I would say, about 6 feet of water out to about 22 feet of water. The big thing with the smallmouth is just finding the larger rock in the area. That's the most attractive thing to them. But stick with it, fish your spots. Don't be afraid to go back to those same spots later in the day, because there's definitely times where the fish are sluggish and definitely times where the school turns on and it can be really fast action. So I hope these tips help you out. Good luck fishing and have a great weekend.